Good morning. I'm going to call the Policy Committee meeting for September 26th to order. I need an approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next is approval of the August 21st open session minutes. Anyone have any comments? No.
I do not have any.
And I need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. So those are approved. Mrs. Morris, policies for second review.
Good morning. We have 6 policies for second review. They're companion policies between the HR chapter and the student chapter, and they all revolve around discrimination and harassment. These went they came before you at the last policy committee meeting and went to the board. I've received no recommended changes or proposals. We can go through each individually if you want, or if you want to handle them as a group, either way.
If anybody doesn't have comments, we can just make a motion to send them all to the board for approval this time.
Okay. I make a motion that we send 3-7, 7A, 7B, 4-7, 4-7A, 4-7B to the full board for approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next is policies for first review. Mrs. Morris again?
Okay, as you know, the new process I go through all policies within the chapters, and what I'm doing is bringing those to you that require changes. And this is the time that I'm working through chapter 3. And so here are some policies through chapter 3 that needed some change. The first one is 3-1, and it's entitled Responsibilities for Compliance with Board Policy, State and Federal Law. We're proposing the change to the title just be staff responsibilities, and it be a more comprehensive policy that talks about both. It's still an overall kind of aspirational policy, but it talks about the requirement they be familiar with the legal requirements, which was what the other policy is, but also reminding them to attend to the welfare of students, demonstrate integrity and respect, and address complaints appropriately, direct complaints, and encourage a good school-community relationship. So that's a proposed change to that policy.
Okay. The only thing, again, board and superintendent, just we should capitalize throughout it.
Yep.
And I think in 3 that it should be attitudes, behaviors, and communications with an S.
Sure, absolutely.
But basically, it says a little bit of the same thing that was already there, just expanded, right?
Correct.
That's what I got out of it. Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
I do not.
Should we do these individually or can we do them all together?
You can do them all together if
Okay.
you'd like.
Okay. Well, might as well do them individually.
let's
So I
do
need a motion to send this to the board for first review.
Yep. Motion to send 3-1 to the full board for first review.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next.
Okay. What has been somewhat difficult in reviewing these policies is that our policies are not organized in a way that makes it easy to compare them with those of other districts. So I have added things to these policies to try and be more encompassing, and then there may be some policies down the road that, because we've put them in a place that makes more sense, we then look at deleting some things. And so this policy I've gone through, obviously our policy as well as the state School Boards Association policies and 5 other districts to try and develop some language for you all. The biggest substantive change that is significant given the administrative guideline is the criminal records review. Our current administrative guideline is real prescriptive about the offenses and what that a misdemeanor means this and so
It's
on.
in your packet if you want to.
Yes.
It enumerates the type of crimes and penalties.
The problem that we have with that is the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, has ruled against districts consistently who don't hire people based on a strict two misdemeanors equals no employment. Their requirement is that you look at what the criminal offense is and what the job requirements are. Now, they have allowed us with teachers to say that teachers and administrators can have a very tight, because of the higher position and the level of respect that the community should have for teachers and administrators, you can have a real high threshold for prior criminal behavior. But other jobs, they talk about things like, well, why would a maintenance worker need to follow the same rules as a teacher? So you have to look at the job duties and the level of interaction with children and those when making these determinations. So we've taken this language as straight from what the EEOC has determined is necessary. And then we are going to revise the administrative guidelines to address that. And I will have that revision for you for the next review. But that's a substantive change that I know is one of those things that makes people nervous because it looks like it's going to be much looser. We're going to try and keep it tight, but it is going to require a real case-by-case analysis that we didn't necessarily have to do before.
Yeah, because I really like the administrative guidelines because they went into more, you cannot be hired if you've done this, and this. So hopefully we can get some sort of.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at specific offenses that say, if you have a misdemeanor in this,
Okay.
you can't be hired at all, and some more
Okay.
of that. But it's going to require Dr. Barnes and Ms. French and I to do some
Okay.
digging.
And is it the superintendent or his designee in this, or does the superintendent have to make these decisions?
Generally, it's superintendent designee.
Okay.
And when I say superintendent, I can add designee because sometimes I think to add
And
it,
maybe
I
we
don't.
should have in every policy that the references to this, well, it can't probably be every policy, but a lot of policies where when you make a reference to the superintendent, it also includes his designee. Because I assume he's not going to look at all this stuff all the
He
time.
is not.
Okay. Or designee, it should
Yeah.
be.
I'll add that language.
Or you can add it to the bottom of it, just that any reference to the superintendent includes reference to his designee.
A catch-all.
Just as a catch-all. The last sentence of the red line that you gave us is, in addition, each contract executed by the board with an independent contractor or for services of independent contractor must require the contractor to check sex offender registries for their employees or.
For anybody working on anybody involved in the contract, I can clarify.
Can you add that?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I'm on
Page 2 of
page
7.
2. And the red, that's where she was talking about criminal records review. The very last sentence of the red, yeah. And then on the next page, on 3, there's 2 paragraphs that have been crossed out. The second one refers to all newly hired or rehired employees have to have a background check, but this criminal record review only refers to new employees, right? Failure of an applicant. Okay, you took out, so final candidate, so
Yes,
you
that
think that
covers
already
both.
includes it?
Correct.
Okay. And again, just a bunch of titles of people
Sure.
we need to capitalize. Never mind. I have nothing else on 3. On 4 of 7, it's not a red line part. The second full paragraph underneath promotion and transfer of professional and classified employees with respect to lateral transfers. With respect to deputy associate and assistant superintendents, this says that that the superintendent can make lateral moves and then announce it to the board. But they have contracts with their title in it. So I'm not really sure how you can make lateral moves when there's a contract.
Well, the lateral moves would be between assistant superintendent and assistant superintendent position. And some of them, and probably we haven't always, our current contracts do say assistant superintendent for
Right. So
whatever. So we would change, we would be bringing it to you for
Right.
revision.
So I think it should just be principal, assistant principal, and directors.
And we could just say lateral transfers and not list the titles.
But it still has the same problem. There's,
I thought the board had decided that it would come
Well,
to us.
I mean, we hold a contract that
Correct.
has a title on it.
Correct.
So in order for him to and this, I've never heard of this happening, but let's say it did, the
Right.
contract has to be amended to reflect that. So it has to come before the board
Correct.
for approval, not just announcement, is I guess
Correct.
what I'm saying. So I guess lateral moves between we've talked about lateral moves with principals and assistant principals in the past. We've never talked about directors, but I get those, but at the top, when there's contracts held, it's a little bit different. That's all I'm trying to say.
So
I think it should just be principals, assistant principals, and
so
directors.
strike out deputy, associate, and assistant superintendent.
Or you could leave it as lateral moves, but not cabinet staff. You know what I mean? You could do it for everything except instead of listing.
We could put lateral transfers of school district employees and not list the positions and then say except where contracts dictate otherwise.
That's fine.
That way, if you have somebody who's in a contracted position, some of our, I don't know.
I'm okay with that.
I don't know where they're.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything on 4?
Well, I'm still kind of
Sorry.
hung up on in the sole discretion of the superintendent. So does that mean that we're saying that he can just move any principal and not bring it to the board?
He has to bring it to the board, but not for approval.
He just announces it.
I don't know if I'd use the word announced, but
Yeah, it says-
informed. But promotions is above that, Melissa, on the next line up. Promotions of current employees to any, so if it's a promotion, he has to come to us. If it's a lateral move, he has the authority to do it, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, because I know in the past, even before Dr. Houlihan was here, that always went to the board in closed session.
It was shared with the board. It's never, principal changes, they've never been approved by the board. They've been shared with the board.
If we hire a new one.
If we hire a new one, but switches like if we moved,
If you
yeah.
Moved them from this school to that
correct.
school.
It was just always an announcement to the board.
Well, that's
Okay.
not true. Promotions of current employees to the position of deputy, associate, and assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals, and directors shall be recommended by the superintendent and approved by the board.
Right, promotions have always been.
So if you promote an AP to a P,
They have to come before you.
right.
It's just the
But if
switch.
you go
lateral.
between schools, he doesn't have to come to us.
It was like Dr. Harvey going from Monroe
To
to Sun Valley. He
right.
shared with you that he was making that move.
Exactly.
But when he
What if you-
hired Mr. Kelly to fill Monroe, you all approved that.
Or you made an AP a principal.
Correct.
We have to approve.
Or if you have a principal and they move down to AP, that's a change too. So that goes to the board.
That's technically not a change. It's not a demotion because in North Carolina, the only demotions are salary based. So it's just a change in assignment.
So that's considered lateral.
Correct. Because they're still, it's still, salary is what makes a position in North Carolina. So it's not a demotion. It's,
So if you move a principal to another school as an AP, does that, is the board informed or do they need to have, does the board have approval or?
that
or
would
is
be considered by law a lateral move
Okay, that
because
is,
they keep their contract.
okay,
We have to fill their contract unless it meets one of the
okay.
termination criteria.
So in that case, the board is just informed.
Correct. And if
Okay.
the board disagreed with it, obviously they could
Right.
share
Okay.
that with the superintendent. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mhm. And it's happened, so, I mean,
Okay.
just want to make sure we were clear on what's informed and
What's
Approved.
And I'll change that language too, that shall be made by the superintendent and he or she shall inform the board as opposed to announce to the board.
Right. Okay. On page 5, does anyone, I don't have anything on 5.
Mm-mm.
And I don't have anything on 6. That's everything that I have. Oh, wait, on page 1, I did have something, sorry. And maybe this is putting too fine of a point on it, but I'm known for that. So recruitment for a specific vacancy will be undertaken only after the need. We do recruit forward, right? That's part of our new, which is awesome.
We hire forward, absolutely.
So does that not, or is that just a specific, what? So
He
maybe
did a
Chris can-
presentation a while back that their new policy is that they, even
You know
if
what I mean?
they're always
Yeah.
interviewing and looking for different positions in the event something happened, they would have a pool ready to go
We
from.
try
So-
not
So he calls it hire
hire forward. We try to make sure that we have qualified candidates that we've been recruiting
Good
already
point,
in the
sorry.
pool to
That's
be
okay.
selected in case during the year we have a resignation or a retirement. And that way we're not waiting until May or June to fill that.
And that is in here.
Like having a deep
Mrs.
bench.
Morris just pointed out to me, we said it has the last, above where I was talking, a continuous system of recruitment and selection of personnel shall be maintained in order to assure competent candidates for employment.
I'm sorry, where did you say that?
She pointed right above the
in
the
black,
last
yeah.
sentence in that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Dr. Barnes.
This is when there's an extension or a new position that's being added or a
Okay.
specific vacancy, then we determine what the qualifications are for the
Okay,
place.
great.
Again, I just want to point out that some of the superintendents and boards
Yep, I'll
are
fix
up and
those.
lower. So
And titles, there's titles of assistant
Yeah.
things too.
It's interesting. The
So
other
you're going to
districts
rework
out
the
there.
administrative guidelines
Yes,
as well?
and we'll have
Okay,
those.
so
for you
those
at
will
the
come
next
back.
meeting. Correct.
So, do you want to wait on 3-3 for the administrative guidelines, or do you want us to go ahead and send this to the full board?
We would
With the
request this go
changes we
for a
just-
review with these changes, and then when it's approved by the board will have the administrative guidance to review at the same time.
Okay, beautiful, because
Okay.
there's 2 times and the administrative guidelines don't require that. So I need a motion to recommend for first review to the Board of Education, 3-3 with our changes.
okay, so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next.
The next policy we have is staff-student relations. I've added some additional expectations to this policy. They were already in our social media policy, but it's hard to find sometimes when you're looking in one place and it's hard to find in another. So we did want to make it clear that it was here, and then we added some headings to make it more user-friendly. But the biggest change, again, is the expectation that staff not engage in personal social media communications with students.
With any enrolled student.
Correct.
What is a student employee?
We have some positions, we have students that they work for us over the summer, they do internships and those kinds of things. Yeah.
On page 2, the pages aren't numbered, so we go to the second page. First paragraph, well, at the very bottom, reporting inappropriate conduct. It says 5 working days. Why can't we report, why can't the individual report the incident immediately?
They can. That's just the expectation that the state board puts in place, that it has to be made within 5 working days. It can't be
Within, it
excess.
doesn't, it
Yeah.
can't be past 5, but it can be
correct. It
before
has to be
5.
within that
Because they
time
might
frame.
wait 2 weeks to think about it or before they get their courage up to report it or something.
I have a question on page 1. Under the new restrictions on electronic communications, there's an exception to the extent that the employee, this is beginning the second line down, except to the extent that the employee and student have an appropriate relationship which originated outside of the school setting. Do you mean if they're family, friends, or give me an example of that?
Correct. An example would be when, my son was in school, some of his hockey teammates, and friends of the family would send me Facebook requests. And so those kinds of, if you have a relationship that's not based in your school, church friends, relatives, family friends, those kinds of things. And again, it still has to be appropriate. You still can't have inappropriate communications.
Okay. The next page, in D, the communication derives from a relationship or association outside of the school setting and occurs with the consent of the parent. Give me an example of that.
It's the same type of situation. It's the outside relationships that you're friends from another thing, and that the parent knows that you're having communication with their child.
But in the other one we talked about, it does not require parent consent. Right?
Well, it's got the written approval from the supervisor and the parent is what the other one says, right? Correct, I think.
It says occurs with the consent of the parent or guardian. So one requires parent consent and the other doesn't.
Please.
Just take a look at that.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Under reporting inappropriate conduct, in the red in the first paragraph, any administrator, including the superintendent, a deputy, associate, assistant superintendent, personnel administrator, or a principal. Is an AP a personnel administrator? No, right? That's meaning HR. Okay, so what about APs? You can't report stuff to an AP, only to the principal?
No, there's certain folks that are required to report to the State Board of Public Instruction, and that's what that sentence is referring to.
Okay.
That these positions are all required by State Board policy to report to the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The others,
Okay.
nobody lower than that is
Okay.
required to.
And when we talk about a school counselor, we're referring to guidance counselors, or could that also be the mental health workers and the social workers?
To Michelle, but I think that's in reference to the school counselor.
Yeah, school counselors have, anybody who's a licensed school counselor has a code of ethics that addresses it. So if it conflicts with them, they don't have to report.
Okay.
Only those, though.
Okay, I think this policy is well needed.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we send policy 3-6 for review to the full board.
All those in favor? Aye.
And the revision I'll make is I'll make it that the parent needs to have knowledge in all cases.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That's good.
Next is 3-10.
This is our grievance process. And if it's confusing under the definitions part, I apologize. I go back to my statutory drafting or lawyer background. And I hate when definitions are not in alphabetical order, and these were all over the place. So I fixed that because it made me crazy.
Why the changes to it?
The changes to
The whole procedure.
just because there were certain things that we needed that needed some clarification that we didn't have in there.
Did this come from the state or from a request?
Yeah, just as we were reviewing the policies for this chapter, we just did some expansion of language.
We, under number 4 on the first page, we have limited what a grievance can be by putting in the words that that such decision have adversely affected the person making the claim. So what's an example of that? And
Because we have two processes. We have a complaint process and we have a grievance process. Now, we can change it. This was just when we went
what's
through.
supposed to be the difference between the two, just out of curiosity?
Grievance is a process by which we sit down and bring the party who's the grievant with the party who's the employee. And so we bring them together to try and reach a resolution. So there's certain things that aren't appropriate.
You bring the
two parties
together.
and that's called the
mediate.
Grievance process.
Yes. And so
Okay.
you put them together, the grievant and the employee making the claim and the employee against whom the claim is made,
Okay.
to try and resolve it. So there's certain things that are not appropriate for that process. So those would go through a complaint process where we do an investigation to see if an employee misbehaved and those kinds of things. And so this is a more direct interaction between the two, and that's the reason for the policy and the difference.
I'm sorry. You just said that you go through an investigation for the complaint process. Do you do
Correct.
an investigation for both or
You
no?
can.
You
Can.
can,
Okay,
but the first step in this is that meeting together within so many days and trying to resolve it.
like mediation or something.
Correct.
So in here, it talks, so if you make a complaint, you can't make a grievance.
We try and track them different ways so that they're, because of the nature of the violations, generally. It's hard to run both simultaneously. Now, we can always do an investigation. Sometimes someone will bring a grievance and we'll say, that's more serious than something we just want to have you mediate. We need to investigate because you are clearly not, it would be unlikely you'd be the only victim, or that is too serious to just handle through this process.
Right. I just think that, like, what's the definition of adversely affected? I mean,
Yeah,
versus just a complaint. Like, how does there, what would be an example of how somebody,
I'm not
somebody
sure.
didn't
Yeah.
get, somebody didn't get a raise, somebody didn't get a promotion? Is that?
Or somebody was assigned duties they didn't want, or somebody, there's lots of different, things we have. I don't know if Dr. Bonds wants to jump in.
He is. He just
He's
stood,
standing up.
he stood
He's
up.
Standing up.
In the past year, what we found is there have been several times when someone would start a grievance and I would find that there may be a policy violation in what they're telling me, and then that would turn it over to an investigation instead.
So grievances do not relate to violations of policy.
If I find that a grievance contains a violation of policy that may have to be investigated separately, I usually ask the grievant to pause the grievance while we investigate.
Okay.
And I don't want to say a grievance would be more minor, but it would be something like they've assigned me lunch duty and I don't want to have lunch duty. Or I have,
And I guess I viewed it the other way around. So that's interesting. Okay.
it just usually depends. A lot of times though, when someone brings a grievance forward and I talk with them, it's turned into an investigation,
Which is a complaint.
which I view as a separate issue, because if it's a policy violation,
Uh-huh.
I have to deal with that employee's misbehavior rather
Okay.
than working to resolve their differences together. Does that make sense? It can be.
Yes.
Okay.
And if it's serious, like the harassment, bullying, discrimination, those all have their own processes, which are
Right.
those initial
Processes
policies.
are in there.
Correct.
Okay. We can go through this, but
And we
if
can pull it
goes
back
for-
if you
it goes
prefer.
for first review and it comes back, I'd like to see the complaint policy alongside of
Yeah,
the
that's
grievance
what I was-
policy.
I don't know, do we
So that
actually-
we could try to clarify that for employees maybe somehow. Okay, so I have a few more. So there's a B under grievance. There's an A. I think we need it should be A, and then after the B is a new one, and then there should be a C before an employee has been subject to discrimination on the basis.
Sure.
And then that
D.
becomes D. Okay, then the next, an official. The official is, who can be an official?
It's typically Dr. Barnes.
Can we put something in there that says it's in the HR department? Or, I mean, would we go outside of that, or it would be you or your designee?
Yeah, human
Can we put
resources
that
or
it's-
designee.
It's the assistant superintendent for human resources or designee. Does anyone else have anything on two? I'm sorry. On three, under time limitations, so a formal grievance shall be filed as soon as possible, but in no event longer than 30 days after disclosure of the facts giving rise to the grievance. For a grievance submitted after 30 days that claims a violation, misapplication, or misinterpretation of state or federal law, the superintendent can determine whether or not the grievance goes forward. Only on those things?
That's typically when, when we do it. If
Wouldn't
we've
that
done
be a
this.
complaint, though? Is it just,
It's generally a complaint.
so if it's violation of law or policy or something like that, those are complaints, and grievances are something smaller than that? Okay. Okay. At the language at the bottom, and I'm going to point this out, and we're protecting the school system. So failure by the official, so that's the school system, to communicate a decision within a specified period of time, they can say there's a delay and they still have the right to make a decision. On the next page, if the grievant fails to do something within a time period, they're done.
Well, because the only time that the employee can do it is if they give the reasons, like such as the complexity of the investigation.
Okay.
Whereas if the employee just fails to appeal, we're saying you have 10 days to appeal, and then they wait outside of it. We can,
But we're going to be really careful not to do that very often.
Well, and it
right?
gives them
delays.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it does give them, unless they've notified the official of delay and the reason for the delay.
Okay.
It does add that in there.
Okay.
If something weird happens. We just don't want things to hang out there forever.
Yes.
So we can close
And I understand
loops.
that. Okay. Anything else on 3 for anybody? On 4?
We were on 4, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I started on 3 and then went to 4. Under procedure step 1, we took out some of the things that the written grievance had to include and added stuff. Like the specific resolution desired. Like, is that up to the employee to decide what resolution they want? I mean,
that's what they're asking.
I want my supervisor fired.
Yeah, and we just want to know what they want so that there can start to be that mediation process. And it may be that they don't get that, obviously, but it could be, I want not to have to do a card rider duty or those kinds of things.
Okay. 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 And so, yeah, okay. Page 5. Talk to me about what the difference between a mandatory appeal and a discretionary appeal is.
There's certain that are required by state law that the board has to hear. And so those would be those mandatory appeals.
Under 1-18?
Yeah, 1-18 does explain those, correct?
They does, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then discretionary appeals would be those things that you're not required. Some of those might be athletic eligibility or grades,
Right.
those kinds of things.
Okay.
Now, there's those that are related to employment as well, but
Okay.
that's what I can think of.
Okay. I do want to see it next to the complaint process for
Yeah.
next meeting, but we
I'm
can
going to see if we actually have one on complaint process. And we can hold this one if you'd like to do some more work on it.
I would like to. I would like to see the
Yeah,
complaint.
we
And
can
if we
table
don't
this.
have one, maybe we can explain the difference
And maybe
to
what I can do
employees.
is make
And
this.
maybe that'll help cut down on grievances if that's what the purpose is to kind
Yeah.
of.
And maybe we can make it one. We'll table this one and I'll work on that.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yep.
Okay,
Works
great.
for me. Thank you.
Okay. Next is 3-13.
Yeah.
16, sorry.
It's the leave policy, and since it dealt with leave and benefits, I'm recommending changing the title to leave and benefits. And the language is just clarification language. It's nothing substantive in nature.
Okay. And we don't have any administrative guidelines to 3-16, right?
No,
Okay.
and
But we're going to
do that.
Okay.
What we have used as our administrative guidelines in the past is the state board puts out it's the benefits and employment policy manual, and we've used that as the administrative guidelines, but we're going to actually put some together. Now, it's consistent with that manual, but it'll be easier for employees to find.
Okay. What's the name of that manual?
North Carolina Public Schools Benefits and Employment Policy
Okay.
Manual. It's in
Got
the
it
front,
there,
it's
yeah,
in that
at the top.
italics.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Just again, the capitalization, uppercase, lowercase.
And I try and catch this. Most other districts do lowercase, and so I try and catch it uppercase.
So I need a motion to send this to the board for first review.
Okay, so moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
And the final policy before you all today is a proposed new policy, Title I, Parent and Family Engagement. This is, there is a requirement under Title I that we have the components that are in this policy.
Okay, I was going to say, so
Yeah.
this comes from title.
And I also believe there may be a component in the new federal ESSA. I'm not
Yes.
quite sure, but I think they've tied that in.
And what, we have all of the components of this policy in other policies.
Okay.
And so for previous audits and reviews, we have cobbled together all of those policies and said, here's all the pieces.
Okay.
Dr. Hogston and I talked, and we determined it's best to put it all in one place, and it's easier for her. I actually wrote this draft back in 2017, and so she is excited about it. And so we are recommending this go for review. But like I said, all of these are required, and they're
Okay.
essentially from other policies, just all in one place for.
There's a lot of copies that have to go out to parents yearly, right? So we do that already. That's a lot of work. Okay.
Yeah, we do have a lot of notices that go out.
And do we have these written parent and family engagement plan, or is that just what the policy is both plan as well? And the,
I think she has a plan as in addition
Okay.
to this.
And every
Okay.
school is required to have their own family Title I engagement.
that's what
plan.
I saw that.
Now, this, one other thing is that this requires parental input. So what's going to happen between the board review and the board approval and before our next policy
It'll
meeting?
go out for.
Yeah, Ms. Hogston, we wanted to make sure you all were okay with where we were going before we
Okay.
brought the parents in to change
Okay.
things.
She's going to have to host a series of hearings or.
Yeah, she's going to
or
have a
input
meeting where
sessions.
she's going to,
That's cool.
yeah.
The bottom of page 2, shall invite appropriate school personnel from private schools. Is that a,
That's a federal requirement,
federal.
and we do that.
They don't have to come.
They
but
don't
we
have to come,
invite
yeah.
them.
right? I get it.
Yeah, we do that both in EC and in Title I, so yeah.
Okay. On page 3, in addition, school system officials in Title I shall do the following. 1, the fourth line, by including parents on the school advisory committee. Is that site-based, or is that a separate Title I school advisory?
No, that's the
That's-
school, that's the
that's
site-based.
So can we call it that?
Sure.
Because we call them site-based, right? We don't, okay.
Because I thought it was the advisory committee.
That's what
that
I
we
wasn't
have.
sure, yeah.
Okay, so site-based.
Yeah. And in another, just in some places, we call it Title I program, and sometimes we call it programs. So
Okay.
I assume it's programs. And there's an annual evaluation that you have to do. So we've been doing all this.
We have.
We just never knew that. Okay, cool. I'm trying to see if I have anything else.
I do like the way that you've
I do too.
put it all in one.
Organized.
It gives, I think it'll give her a good place to say to parents and others, this is where you go, as opposed to having to access 4 or 5 different
Right.
policies.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
been, the way we've done in the past is I've actually taken, kind of the policy and highlighter.
I like that it's
Well,
the
the
way it's
online.
organized, although on page 6 of 7.4a, I think we already have it in D. On page 2, so wait, each of those I shall provide notice to the parents.
Yes.
So is it just we want to have it in multiple places
Yeah,
because it's multiple sections? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm good with that. Okay,
Just for clarification.
that was all my questions.
So if we're pulling this all together into a consolidated policy, are we going to have to strike through some policies in other locations just to clean up?
We could, some of them, like a lot of the parental notifications, we have a parent notification policy and it says Title I and it has those in there. So some of the stuff we can, some of it, because it's consistent, it would be helpful to find it in the different locations, but some we may find is not necessary where it is and it's redundant and we would pull it.
Okay. So are you going to come back to us and let us know which ones you recommend
Yeah, as we go through,
pulling?
as we go through. we'll
And one
pull
of the
those.
things she and I were talking about earlier too is there's some references to different positions and what, like, for example, the appeals process,
Yeah.
the transfer appeals process is now under Mrs. Morris. And so there's some cleanup on some policies where positions have changed.
Right.
So we should try to give her the authority here and then recommend it to the full board that she can go in and make just those cleanup type of things.
Mostly on position titles.
Titles and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, and we find things and Katie's great at, she'll find things, she'll say, oh my gosh, this word is spelled wrong, or it's there, THERE, as opposed to there, THEIR, what do we do? And so instead of bringing those back, those cleanup
Mhm.
things, it would be helpful to have the authority to
Absolutely.
clean those
That
up
would
as
be great.
opposed to.
Definitely.
That'd be great. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I need a motion to send this to the board for first review.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. So we're sending 3.1, 3.3, 3.6, 3.16, and the new policy, and we tabled 3.10. Is that
Correct.
what
Correct.
everybody has?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, administrative guidelines.
We've talked about the administrative guidelines for employee
Oh, no, wait,
candidates.
we should make the motion to give you the ability to clean up policies for titles and recommend that to the full board under the first review stuff, right?
Mhm.
Before we move on to stuff we're not voting on, right?
Sure.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, sorry about that.
What do you want to title that?
Technical corrections on that.
Technical corrections would be great.
It's like the,
That's a good word. We give the authority to Michelle Morris to make technical changes, technical and cleanup changes to policies.
Okay.
Without our review. And that has to go to the full board.
Here we go.
Sorry about that. Go
Yep,
ahead.
that's good.
I just wanted to get all
Yeah.
the stuff that needed approval out of the way.
3-3, I'm going to be diligent in adding the administrative guidelines when you look at a policy, if there's an administrative guideline to go with it. And so we've added the 3-3, which is the one that goes with the recruitment selection and personnel policy. And we'll be making some revisions to that, and we'll have those for you at the next meeting.
Okay, great.
The other two we talked about, and I think they were in your packets last time, are 4-7. Just, one of them is a disability discrimination harassment complaint procedure, and one is race discrimination
You're
harassment
not
complaint.
recommending any changes.
Well, what we're recommending, if you remember, when we redid the
You just
policy
separate them.
4-7, we embedded everything into those. So we will be deleting these once that policy is approved, because all of these both are now embedded into those.
Okay, beautiful.
So, yeah, these will both be
Both.
deleted so that you will have one place for all types of discrimination and harassment in the legally protected categories, so that people don't have to try and figure out. We've had a lot of parents say, well, how come there's a sexual harassment discrimination policy, grievance policy, but nothing for disability or race? And we said, well, those are here, and it just doesn't, well, they're not policies, so it just makes it cleaner.
So we're just deleting.
We-
We're going
we-
to delete these because they're all embedded in the other changes that
So
you've already
once it
made.
gets approved at the second review at the
Mhm.
board meeting, these will be deleted.
Correct.
Okay. Anything, does anyone have anything else? Thank you for all this.
No
Yeah,
problem.
that's a lot.
No problem. The hurricane days worked very well for me to catch up on policy. I wrote policy all day Monday.
So unless
job.
anybody has something else, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks. Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.